Okay. Well, welcome in, guys. So we're going to be starting, we're starting a new module today, Radiation Safety 2. Radiation Safety 2 is where we're going to go ahead and run through all of the review about how the body works, how living things work, and then how we talk about how radiation is harmful to living things. That's what we're going to try to learn over these next few weeks, okay? We'll use all of that so that when we get into Radiation Safety 3, we can talk about the things we do to keep ourselves and our patients safe. Okay, but today we got to learn, over the next few weeks, we got to learn why we need to take steps to keep our patients and ourselves and the general public safe. So that's all going to start off with this chapter 41, and that's going to begin with a biological review. So again, reminders. Currently the notes I pass out, the tests that I give, list chapter 41 as the biological review chapter. But of course, if you have the 4th edition of the textbook, you're working out of chapter 40. Okay. If that's ever, if you ever have questions, always feel free to ask. But I know it's kind of a weird little interim right now. Eventually, I'll be all into the new edition. But there's a change that we go through. So, anyways, there we are. Okay. So using the notes, if they help to follow along, maybe you were extra super proactive like you guys and printed out the PowerPoint notes. That's great. Or you have them up on your computer or something. Either way, have some way to follow along, and we'll go through this. So, okay, so we're going to start here. Okay, so again, this section is called Biological Review, talking about the body, and I want to start here. Okay. And the most important thing, so this is going to list this says tissues of the human body. This is roughly speaking listing by volume or amount what we're made of, right? What we're composed of, okay? And what I want you to take away from this is, if you notice, it gives percentages, right? It says 80% water, 15% proteins, 2% lipids, 1% carbohydrates, 1% nucleic acids, okay? So again, taking notes if you need these things, if these things sound important to you, okay? Our body is about 80% water, roughly 3/4 water. A single cell is roughly 3/4 that, okay? About 80%, okay? The important thing when you look at what we're composed of, what are we mostly made of? Water, right? If you talk about what are we majority made of, it's water, okay? The next biggest thing that we're made of are proteins, okay? So when we talk about the likelihood, right? The likelihood of radiation interacting with parts of the body, right? What is that radiation most likely to hit? Water, yeah. So we're going to need to learn about something called radiolysis or radiolysis of water, okay, which is the breakdown of water due to radiation exposure. So we're going to learn about that, learn about how that affects the body. Of this breakdown, which one of these on here would represent our DNA? Yeah, nucleic acids, right? That's what DNA is, right? That's the N and A in DNA, nucleic acid, right? And that's the N and the A in RNA as well, or mRNA, right? Good. So nucleic acids, those are useful because they carry important information, right? But that's only 1% of our body's mass, okay? So it's just not very likely for X-rays or other forms of radiation to directly interact with our DNA. It's most common for radiation X-rays to interact with water in the body, and that water may be nearby to DNA, okay? So we're going to talk about that, talk about how DNA gets affected. That's going to be, secretly, not so secretly, that's going to be our most important thing is the effects that radiation has on our DNA, okay? Because, radiation can ionize water, can damage water, but that doesn't really do too much harm. I mean, we'll learn that it can cause some harm, but it doesn't really do too much lasting harm until it alters, mutates, changes our genetic code, our DNA. Okay, so we're going to learn all about that. But the important thing here is that the body's mostly water, then we have the rest of it. And the nucleic acids, the DNA that we talk about getting hurt, it's about 1%. Okay. Let me move on. A couple of just terminology things that we need to get familiar with. The terms suffixes. So quickly, what's a suffix? the end of a word, right? Which is sort of the opposite of what happens at the beginning of words, called a prefix, okay? And in the middle of the words, usually you'll have a root or combining form, right? Okay, good. But the suffix of the words, what's useful here, and you're going to see 3 primary suffixes related to cells. 2 of them are listed. The third one I'll just tell you. So 2 suffixes related to cells, blast and clast, okay? Blast cells, any cell type, like if I said osteoblast, that's a cell that builds bone, okay? If I said erythroblast, that's a cell building a red blood cell, okay? Blast as a suffix means a cell that generates tissue for specific organs, and in certain circumstances, a blast cell is a cell that's immature. This is going to become important, this idea of immature cells, okay? And just so we can have it on the table, the other word for immature is undifferentiated. We talk about the degree of differentiation or specialization that cells have and how that affects their resistance or sensitivity to radiation. So blast cells are going to become very important. They are, as I just said, the immature, undifferentiated, or non-specialized cells of the body, blast cells. Clast cells are destroying, reabsorbing, tear-down cells. These are there to, as it says, destroy particular cells that are non-functional or worn out. So cells have a usable life, and cells, unlike, so, you know, people get old, what do we do with them? We don't like kill them, right?
Put them in a home.
No. We kind of let them live their life, right? We don't like put them out on a raft or something like that, right? Or send them out to sea. You know, we kind of let people live their lives, right? Even though some person may have outgrown their usefulness to society, let's say. Okay, they're past their point where they're useful to society. We keep people around, right? The body doesn't work like that, okay? In the body, when cells become damaged or worn out or old or non-functional, the body destroys them, okay? It's programmed cell death. We call it apoptosis, okay? And that is the body's way of clearing out, destroying the non-functional, useless stuff, because, you know, it takes energy to take care of an old non-functioning cell, and if it's not doing something for the body, then let's get rid of it. You know, energy's not for free, right? And the body's trying to minimize the amount of extra energy that it uses on things. So clast cells are there to sort of clean up the place. Okay, and then I told you there were 3. Okay, blast, clast. If you see the suffix cyte, C-Y-T-E, at the end of a cell, that's just the suffix we use for a mature cell, okay? So no, remember blast is immature.
Oh.
So the word immature for blast, the word immature should be paired up with the other 2 words, undifferentiated, So roughly speaking, those 3 words, immature, undifferentiated, non-specialized, will sort of go together. Okay, they're the same. They're synonymous, in other words. Okay. I'm not going to put classed up there because I think the screen does an okay job of explaining. Cyte as a suffix. Okay. Cyte cells are mature cells. They are thought of as maintenance cells. Think of like erythrocyte, right? Red blood cell. It's a mature red blood cell, right? Leukocyte, right? Osteocyte. These are all matured forms of these cells. So we have blast, clast, and cyte. Good. We'll just need to have those so that we can put them in terms and sort of, you know, throw those terms around and have you guys understand it. Importantly, for radiation safety terms, blastula or blast. See the blast coming up there again, okay? Blast, or a blastula, is a small bundle of reproductive or stem cells describing the earliest stages of a pregnancy, right? There's a sperm and an ovum, 2 cells, right? Becomes 1 cell, right? That 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, and so on, right? And the story goes. So that bundle, that initial bundle of cells that doesn't look like anything special, that's a blastula. Okay, we'll use blastula to describe that. This is reason why it's important. Blast cells, blastulas, any cell with the blast term at the end of it is much more sensitive to radiation than the mature cell it turns into. Okay, so an erythroblast, an immature red blood cell, is more sensitive to radiation than an erythrocyte, than a mature red blood cell. Okay, and this is because, so we're going to learn about what makes cells more or less sensitive to radiation. One of the things that makes a cell in the body more sensitive to radiation is rapid mitosis, rapid reproduction rate. You know, cells have to split, right? Have to copy their components and split, right? The more times you have to copy those things and split, the more frequently that happens, the more sensitive to radiation damage you are. Okay, it's similar to if I asked you to copy your textbook, right? Like not like put it through a photocopier, but like a scribe in ancient Egypt, right? I asked you to literally copy that textbook word for word, like write it down on a tablet or something, right? Stone tablet. You could do it probably, yeah. But I mean, that's a 600-page textbook, right? So give you some time, right? And if I give you enough time, you're not going to make any mistakes, right? You can take your time, look word for word, make sure every punctuation's in there, right? All the illustrations are good. But if I ask you to do it in a shorter amount of time, right, you're more likely to make some mistakes, right? Some errors in the copying, okay? And the shorter and shorter and shorter, you see how this goes, right? The shorter and shorter and shorter the time frame I give you to copy all that information, the more likely there are to be mistakes, okay? Now throw in, every now and then someone comes in and like rips out a page, okay, without you noticing, okay? Then you're way more likely to make some mistakes if someone rips out a page, right? Radiation works like that. Radiation is like ripping out a page, okay? Changing the information while the cell's trying to copy the information, okay? The faster I ask you to copy the information, the more pages I rip out, the more likely there are to be errors in that information. And then you go hand that copy to somebody, right, and go, here's all the information. They don't have it all, right? They've got some changed, mixed up version of the information, okay? So copying the book, making mistakes is like random mutation, okay? That happens all the time. But then radiation comes along and starts ripping out pages too, and that really, really starts to complicate things and really make for major changes. So one thing that makes cells more sensitive than another cell is the rate at which it reproduces, okay? Do you guys know the average lifespan of a cell in the body? Any ideas? It's about 24 hours. Yeah, about 24 hours. The longest lived cells in your body, how long do they live for? Are there any cells that live your entire life? Absolutely. Not your DNA, because those DNA not cells, right? That's just the genetic code. But your neurons, right? Your not your nerves, but the neurons, the neural cells that build nerve fibers. Those, once you get them, roughly speaking, once you're born, there's no more produced. Okay, you don't gain any neurons. You don't grow new neurons necessarily as you age. Okay, the way you get smarter is not by growing a bigger brain, right? It's by improving the connections between the existing nerve cells in your brain already. Neurons live your whole life, okay? And if you lose them, they're gone forever. Okay, this is one reason why it's like difficult or impossible to repair spinal cord trauma, right? Or traumatic brain injuries, right? People don't necessarily ever fully recover from a traumatic brain injury, right? You've damaged the neural tissue, okay? However, so your whole lifetime for some cells, where the average lifespan of a cell is like 24 hours, right? Red blood cells live like 4 months, okay? So there's this constant state of things being reproduced, but everything's reproduced at different rates, okay? The cells that reproduce the quickest, okay, are more sensitive than others to radiation damage. So we're going to talk about that, what makes them more sensitive and so on. Okay, good. So we got some terminology down. Let's finish up with some more terminology. In the body, this is important because we're going to need to categorize the body's cells. That's what we're made of, right? We're made of cells, yeah? We need to put our cells into one of two categories, okay? Most of your body is made of what we call somatic cells. Somato, S-O-M-A-T/O, is the combining form. If you haven't heard that term before, combining form roughly means the root word. Okay, somato is the combining form or root word for body. Okay, so is soma. Soma is just a shortened up version of that. Okay, so soma means body. The body's cells are there to keep the body alive. Obvious, right? Your heart cells are there to keep blood pumping, right? Your brain cells are there to keep you thinking and experiencing, right? Your intestinal cells are there to keep you absorbing food and liquid, yeah? So the body's cells, your body's cells are there to preserve yourself, okay? But you don't only have somatic cells, right? Some small part of everyone's body, for the most part, is dedicated to producing cells that could reproduce that organism, that could reproduce you. Okay, we call these your genetic cells. And it's no secret, right? These are sperm in males and ova in females. Okay. Where is sperm made in males? In the testes, right? Where are the ova made in females? Ovaries, right? And only in the testes and only in the ovaries are they produced, right? So those areas, those two things, those two organs, ovaries, two ovaries in females, two testes in males, those are what we call the gonads. Okay, the gonads are for our purposes. Now that we've divided the body's cells into two categories, those are a completely different category of organ. Okay, every other organ in your body really is there to support you. Okay, but your reproductive system, with the gonads being the main functional part of it, are there to not keep you alive, but to keep your genetic information alive, right? To produce a new one of you, right? Not an exact copy of you, right? But a new one of you, to preserve the species, in other words. Genetic cells use the root word genesis, or it actually, the root of that is just gen, G-E-N, but genesis means production, beginning, creation. Good. So we have genetic cells and somatic cells. Okay, so now that we've said we have two categories of cells, let's be more general. Okay, let's just say, what on average does a single cell have, and what's the important stuff? Okay, this is not going to be a semester-long, anatomy of a cell thing. Okay, we're not going to need to do too much. Okay, it's not as hard as it might seem. I don't know. I think people get intimidated when they start to look at, these microscopic structures and see all these different, all these terms thrown around with Latin and Greek roots. And it's not as hard as it might seem. We're going to try to simplify it and focus on the important stuff. Okay? So let me just list off some things, and then we'll sort of look at the picture of a cell and try to get an idea. Okay? So we say that although specialized cells develop unique structures, all cells are going to have some basic components. And even that's not true, because all cells don't have all these components. Okay, like sperm don't have most of this stuff. All right. So, but the point is, like when we teach you about the bones in the skeleton, we say, like, here's a picture, here's an average bone, right? And we always show a femur. Okay, but the femurs, you got two femurs, you got 206 bones in your body. The 204 other bones look completely different, right? Okay, so when we say, like, here's what a cell looks like, we're just saying, on average, like, here's what cells look like. Okay, so you can get a rough idea of what we mean. Okay, but there's all this specialization that's happening in the body, right? You've got, trillions of cells in your body, and they all take on different structure depending on where they're being used and what they're being used for. Anyways, on average, cells have cytoplasm. Okay, this is the watery medium in which the organelles, like your body has organs, right? Heart and lungs and stuff like that. Cells have organelles, little organs. Okay, little functional pieces. Okay. The cytoplasm is the watery fluid or liquid in which the organelles are suspended. In other words, that's where they float around. Okay, your cells are mostly water, kind of like you're mostly water. Yeah, please.
Are you going to break down a cell right now? Is that what
I am.
you're doing?
Yeah, so it's that first thing, those first bullet points above membranes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, that's what we're going through that list right now. Yeah. Yeah, this list on the screen right now is the same as the top of your. So finally, we've actually made it into the notes after 20 minutes of talking. All right, so cytoplasm's the liquid. As I said earlier, when we talked about the body's breakdown, right? We said the body's 80% water, right? Similarly with the cells. Okay, it might be a little different on average, but similarly, the cells are mostly water. That's the correct thing to say, is they're mostly water. The other things that are important in a cell, mitochondria. Okay, mitochondria are what we always talk about them as an energy factory. They're the energy source for the cell. Do you guys know what we mean? Does anyone have an idea what we mean by like the energy source? I won't go much deeper than this, but I think it might be useful if you've heard. So like what do muscles use for energy? It's often used in the context of muscles. You're on the right track. Muscles need protein, but you guys, I guarantee in high school science you learned about ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Okay, ATP is the molecule that your body uses to do things. Okay, to do functional active transport things for the cells. The mitochondria is where ATP is synthesized. Okay, I won't go much further than that. In the medical assisting section, we go a lot deeper into that. If you're just doing the X-ray section, you don't need much more than that. Okay, mitochondria are the energy source, but the secret behind the scenes is that's where the ATP is produced. Okay, muscles need ATP to function. Okay, anyways, let's move on. Oh, fun fact about mitochondria. I'll get to this. It's down here at the bottom, but you guys probably already know it. Where's all your DNA kept? Like in a cell, where's the DNA? And what's the DNA useful for? Like, why do we have DNA? So like, inside of a library, they keep books, right? And what's inside of books? Like stories, information, right? Your nucleus in your cells houses the DNA. The DNA is like the books. It's all the information, okay? So it's the DNA, your DNA carries your information, okay? It's not like a story about you, though. It's the information on how to produce your parts, okay? Not how to produce my parts, right? How to produce your parts. Your DNA has all the information on how to produce the parts of you, yeah? And here's what's cool. Every single cell of your body in the nucleus has a full copy. Every single cell has a full copy of the DNA to reproduce you completely, okay? Every single one of your trillions of cells, okay? But I told you I wanted to tell you a cool thing about mitochondria. So your nucleus has all the DNA to make you. You got roughly half of it from dad, right? And half of it from mom, okay? To the information to produce you. But here's what's cool. The information, the DNA, the genetic code to produce mitochondria, for whatever interesting biological reason, is housed outside of the nucleus. Okay, so there's DNA, there's genetic information housed outside of your nucleus. Okay, so now, when a sperm meets an ovum, okay, which one's bigger, sperm or ova? Ovum. The ovum's way larger, like magnitudes bigger, right? The sperm is just a little head and a little tail. There's three parts, head, midpiece, tail, but importantly, the head of the sperm, right? In the head of a sperm, the only thing that's there is the genetic information housed in the nucleus. Okay, so the dad, the sperm donor can only give the ovum the genetic information from the nucleus. That means anything housed outside of the nucleus cannot come from the male. Okay, the information to build your mitochondria is housed outside of your nucleus in your cells, okay? Which means your mitochondrial DNA can only come from your mother, okay? And hers can only come from her mom, and so on, right? Everybody's, mine included, right, male and female, everyone's mitochondrial DNA is only passed down maternally, okay? So there's some part of you, importantly the energy factory, the ATP synthesizing part, that for whatever interesting biological reason, the information's housed outside of the nucleus, and for that reason it can only be handed down maternally. Kind of cool, right? Because we think of ourselves as like, half and half, dad and mom, right? But you're a little more than half mom, okay? Because mom gave the full ovum, right, where the male only gives the sperm cell, which only has the genetic information in the nucleus. Kind of neat. Okay, good. That's my fun fact about mitochondria. Yeah. Okay, moving on. Ribosomes, lysosomes. These are parts of the cell. Ribosomes are parts of the cell that help manufacture proteins. Proteins are useful. Proteins build things in the body, okay? Things in the body, if it's not water, are built out of proteins, okay? Everything. If it's not built out of proteins, it's built out of lipids, okay? And going back to our little, I'll go back to this just a second, but to come back to this little breakdown here, 15% protein, 2% lipids. This 17% of stuff, this is what builds all the structure in your body, right? You're 80% water. The rest of it that's not water is made out of protein and lipids, okay? Because this stuff, carbohydrates, those are just sugars, right? And then nucleic acids are just genetic information. So all of your structure is just the 17% here, proteins and lipids, and most of it's proteins, okay? So when we say ribosomes manufacture proteins, ribosomes are the parts of the cell that are helping build the pieces of you, okay? Lysosomes break things down. Lyse means to break down. Endoplasmic reticulum, big long term. It's really simple. It's about as goofy and simple as can be. It's a highway system. It's the system of tubes leading through your cytoplasm that lets things in and out of the cell. Highway system. Interstate. Membranes. Membranes are going to become important, okay? Like your skin keeps the outside out and your inside in, right? Okay, super important, right? If you get a break in your skin, you get infections, right? You get a bad enough infection, you could die, right? So your skin's pretty important for you, yeah? And also importantly, your skin helps waterproof you, right? It helps sort of keep all your water in, right? Cell membranes do that for the cell, okay? Cell membranes are what we call selectively permeable. Permeable just means you can get through it, okay? Selectively permeable means we're only going to let certain things in and certain things out, okay? It's a covering for the cell that keeps things out and keeps things in, lets certain things in, certain things out. The membrane's important. If the membrane of a cell ruptures, the cell dies, okay? And many cells, many cell membranes, and they're all, if radiation's going to get into the cell, it's got to first pass through the membrane of the cell, right? So we worry about the cell's membranes rupturing. Nucleus is the control center. It's where all the DNA is housed, all the genetic information. And the other term, nucleoli, are little helpers helping in the production of ribosomes. For our purposes, learning about radiation safety, the most important things for us are going to be the nucleus, the cell membrane, and the cytoplasm. Most interactions with radiation are going to be with the cytoplasm. The thing we're actually worried about hurting is the nucleus and the membranes. You rupture the membranes, the cell dies. You damage the genetic information in the nucleus. When the cell goes to replicate, it might just die, okay? And even worse, if it survives, it will be mutated, okay? And mutations are not great, right? Mutations cause disease, right? Cancer is a genetic, cancer is the activation of a gene that makes the cell do something different than it normally does, right? It makes the cell grow in a weird way, okay, either extra fast or some wrong way. Okay, I'm trying to make it simple sounding. So mutations are not good, right? We want to avoid as much as possible mutations to the genetic information housed in the nucleus. Now, the interesting thing is, because you guys went through Radiation Safety 1, we're exposed to radiation all the time, right? Our cells have to copy their information all the time. We're always being exposed to radiation. There's always mutation happening, okay? That's why, you know, we have a 30% chance of developing cancer in your life, right? Because mutations are just always occurring, okay? And you need that to happen. You need DNA to mutate in order for species to evolve, okay? We can't evolve and change unless random mutation takes place, right? That's how Darwinian evolution works, right? An organism has mutations. If those mutations are good for the organism to reproduce, then the organism reproduces. If those mutations are bad for the organism to reproduce, then it doesn't reproduce, right? And that mutation stops, okay? So these mutations are useful for evolution, but they make problems for, you know, the individual, right? Okay, or the individual's offspring. All right, so here's our picture. Now we've talked about those things. So let's take a look, and we want to focus in on the nucleus, right? The nucleus sort of housed in the center-ish of the cell. All those little squigglies are our DNA, okay? Right now, the cell's in one of its stages where the DNA is sort of, in big air quotes, unpacked, okay? When the cell gets ready to divide, it will pack all that DNA up into little X-shaped sausages, okay? Those X-shaped sausages are called chromosomes. So we'll talk about those chromosomes, but that's where all the important stuff is at, right in the nucleus of the cell. The cell membrane does the covering, and then all that is it's all sort of greenish, but all this sort of greenish all throughout, that's all the water. It's all filled with water, cytoplasm. Okay. All right, so let's just review those two things, membranes and the nucleus. Membranes, they surround each organelle, they surround the nucleus, and they surround the entire cell. Cell membranes are actually really kind of cool. They're made of a molecule called a phospholipid, and a phospholipid has this property that one end of a phospholipid is hydrophilic. I'll explain this in a second. Hydrophilic. The other end of a phospholipid is called hydrophobic. You guys probably know phobic, right? What's a phobia? A fear, right? What's hydro meaning? Water. So one end of this molecule is afraid of water, okay? Now, philic means to like something, okay? So the other end of this molecule is hydrophilic, means it wants to be near it, okay? So phospholipids have this property that one end of them really likes water. The other end of them would like nothing else but to stay away from water, okay? This causes the molecule to orient itself when it gets near water, okay? And if you put enough of these molecules together, they can point their hydrophobic ends towards each other and point their hydrophilic ends towards the water. There's water outside the cell, water inside the cell. Then they arrange themselves into this sort of sheet that covers the cell. Maybe men, but probably ladies. Have you guys heard of micellar cleansers for makeup and stuff, right? Micellar cleansers have these things called micelles in them, okay? Micelles are just a ball of phospholipids. It's the same stuff that makes up your cell membrane, but it's a ball of them. If you take a bunch of phospholipid molecules and drop them in water, all the heads that are hydrophobic will try to point away from the water, and all the tails that are hydrophilic will try to point towards the water, and it'll form this like ball, okay? And the ball is called a micelle, okay? So those micellar cleansers are full of that stuff, and they're really good at.
When you shake it,
Yeah.
it combines everything then?
They should already be sort of clumped up together, but and then I guess it does something neat with cleaning the face or whatever. Yeah, but so let me show you guys.